You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
What's the common denominator in security incidents? Escalations and lateral movement. When a privileged account is compromised, attackers can seize control of critical assets. With bad directory hygiene and years of technical debt, identity attack paths are easy targets for threat actors to exploit, but hard for defenders to detect. This poses risk in Active Directory, Entra ID, and hybrid configurations. Identity leaders are reducing such risks with attack path management. You can learn how attack path management is connecting identity and security teams while reducing risk with Bloodhound Enterprise, powered by SpecterOps. Head to specterops.io today to learn more. SpecterOps, see your attack paths the way adversaries do.
They're not using any sort of really advanced techniques. They're using pretty simple stuff, but they're using it in a different way. And by using it this way, they show that they have an understanding of how SOCs work, which is something that a lot of threat actors don't.
That's Max Gannon, Intelligence Manager with Cofense Intelligence. The research we're discussing today is titled The Rise of Precision-Validated Credential Theft, a New Challenge for Defenders.
My team has what we call qualitative groups, and when we find some kind of interesting behavior, we tag it with a group, and a lot of times we'll only see it once or twice, so it's not really worth writing about just yet. But when we've seen enough of this qualitative group, especially if it suddenly starts to become more common, then we'll really do an in-depth dive on it and start writing about it. So this was originally something we saw in very small numbers. It was enough to be mildly frustrating, but not a real problem. And then, especially within the last month, we've seen it drastically increase to the point where if it's annoying for us, it's got to be a big problem for SOCs.
Right. Well, can you explain what precision-validated phishing is and how it differs from traditional phishing attacks?
So the first step is, someone gets an email, a credential phishing email, and typically it's Microsoft spoofing, but we've seen other brands as well. And then usually this email gets reported and the SOC gets the URL, and the SOC tries to visit the URL, and the credential phishing page sends out a prompt and it says, hey, I need you to confirm your identity and put in the email address that this link was sent to. And so that's context that the SOC needs to have. If they somehow get that information and are allowed to use it, then they enter it and they move on to the next step. Sometimes this is the actual Microsoft branded credential phish, which has all the little bells and whistles that you would expect. And sometimes there's an additional step where once you've verified the email address, then they send an email to the email account, and then you have to use a code or a link from that email to progress on to the next step of the credential phish. And this final step is hosted typically on a different site. And that final step usually stays up for significantly longer than the intermediary, the first step.
How do you rate the sophistication of these threat actors?
That's a bit difficult because, as I said earlier, they're not using any sort of really advanced techniques. They're using pretty simple stuff, but they're using it in a different way. And by using it this way, they show that they have an understanding of how SOCs work, which is something that a lot of threat actors don't. But by making this validation only work this certain way, they're taking advantage of a flaw in cybersecurity procedures, really. So for that, I'd rate them at, pretty highly for having additional information about how we work, because that's unusual. For sophistication, actual sophistication, I'd rate it like probably middle, because once you get your hands on the code, it's really easy to figure out. They don't do much in the way of obfuscation.
Well, can you share an example of how this has been used in an actual phishing campaign?
Yeah, certainly. So we got in a pretty standard looking Microsoft Office credential phishing campaign. And we went ahead and visited it and immediately came up with the notification that we needed an email address. So this escalated things a little bit because while we do have access to email addresses, a lot of customers don't like it when you use an email address. There's a lot of issues with that, especially for outsourced SOCs. So we were able to get the information we needed and then find the list of targeted email addresses and use an email address from that targeted list and progress through the phish and get what we needed.
Can we go through some of the mechanics here? I mean, how does the real-time email validation process work within these phishing attacks?
Yeah, so the first step is really basic. It just compares the email address you enter to a list of email addresses that the threat actor has of people who've been targeted by the phishing campaign. So that step, if you can find the list, which is usually obfuscated, but if you can find it, then you can bypass it. The next step is actually sending the email address, sending an email to the email account. Sometimes this involves clicking a link. Sometimes this involves just copying and pasting a code.
And what kinds of technologies or methods are they using to validate the email addresses in real time?
So most of this takes place using pretty basic JavaScript that's just built into the credential phishing page. None of the actual techniques used are particularly advanced. They're just combining known capabilities into a new method of doing things that makes life very difficult.
We'll be right back. And now, a word from our sponsor, ThreatLocker. Keeping your system secure shouldn't mean constantly reacting to threats. ThreatLocker helps you take a different approach by giving you full control over what software can run in your environment. If it's not approved, it doesn't run. Simple as that. It's a way to stop ransomware and other attacks before they start, without adding extra complexity to your day. See how ThreatLocker can help you lock down your environment at www.threatlocker.com. And now a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud. Identity is the new battleground, and attackers are exploiting stolen identities to infiltrate your organization. Traditional defenses can't keep up. SpyCloud's holistic identity threat protection helps security teams uncover and automatically remediate hidden exposures across your users, from breaches, malware, and phishing to neutralize identity-based threats like account takeover, fraud, and ransomware. Don't let invisible threats compromise your business. Get your free corporate darknet exposure report at spycloud.com/cyberwire and see what attackers already know. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. So what makes precision-validated phishing particularly challenging for security teams to detect and analyze?
So it's especially difficult for external SOCs, but even for a company who has an internal SOC, it's difficult because first you need the email address. And as I said, typically SOCs are not provided with this email address. So even if you somehow manage to get the email address, then you have to also get the company's permission to use the email address. And getting permission is sometimes just not possible. So SOCs are pretty much blocked off by company policy at this point. And even if they somehow get approval to use an email address, then if one of the next steps involves sending a confirmation email, they have to get access to somebody's inbox. And that is, I've personally only heard of 2 situations in which that has happened. It's extremely rare. It's people are just not comfortable doing that with good reason. So SOCs are able to get maybe half of the IOCs they could gather otherwise. And because of this gating, oftentimes once the first couple steps go through, they're redirected to a final credential phishing page. And this final one has the IOCs that the SOCs need, because the intermediary pages can be reported and taken down. But if the final one stays the same, the threat actors just send out a new campaign with new intermediaries. So the SOCs are just stuck going for the first URL because that's all they have.
Oh, that's interesting. So, given all that, I mean, what are your recommendations then? I mean, how should organizations best defend themselves?
So, luckily, there are very few situations in which a email is sent to the email account. So, for most SOCs, the first obstacles they need to overcome are finding the email address of the recipient and being allowed to use that email address on the credential phishing page. So for this to happen, what they need is open communication. They need to have a contact at the company who they can talk to. They can explain the situation. They can say, okay, so we've got this, potentially very advanced phish that is very much targeting specific people. Can you give us approval so we can do this investigation, so we can get this additional information and help protect you better? And if there's that open line of communication, then they're going to have a lot more success than somebody who is really just, they don't really have a good contact point.
Are there particular industries that you're seeing targeted here?
I think the one we have seen it with most is the oil and natural gas sector. They're the ones we've seen the most of this with, unfortunately. But it's becoming all around more common.
And what is the ultimate goal here? I mean, are these financially motivated attacks? Are they going after? Is it a corporate espionage situation? What are you all seeing?
So I think at a very base level, what threat actors are trying to do is improve their return on investment. So credential phishing happens all the time, and typically, once they send out, threat actors will send out these mass email campaigns trying to get as many credentials as they can, but the credentials are typically unverified. So when they sell them in bulk on the dark web, they don't actually get very much money for them. They just really don't get much money because they're not validated. They don't have any sort of confirmation that these are active accounts, that these credentials can be used, and that sort of thing. But with precision validation, the threat actors can not only sell it for more because it's validated, but they can also sell it in groups. They can say this specific list of people with this title at this company, here are their credentials, and they can sell it for a lot more than just a big collection of 1,000 email addresses and passwords. So even if they're not doing an additional, more targeted approach, simply from return on investment by using this technique, they're making a lot more money.
Is there a user awareness component here? I mean, can we educate our users to do a better job defending against? I guess are there any specific tells that you all have observed?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things is the prompt for email addresses. Even sometimes when you put in the correct email address, it'll prompt you again for an email address just to make sure. So what this really, to me, it's kind of a surprise, or it should be a surprise, because when you visit these web pages, if you're using a password manager, all your credentials are already saved. So if you're visiting a website and you think it's Microsoft, and you go to the Microsoft website and your password manager isn't giving you credentials, then there's probably something wrong. So obviously look at the URL, but looking for obvious signs like, it's not giving me the autofill information here when it always does on the Microsoft accounts. stuff like that can really help you spot these things.
What are some of the key takeaways you hope that readers get if they check out this research?
So the biggest thing I think that I'd like people to get from this is that every company that has a SOC, whether they're internal or external, needs to have clear communications with them, because this is a very obvious situation in which communication is important. And communicating can potentially help save people from getting compromised. If they say, okay, we know who else is on the list, we can inform them. But if you don't have that communication, then not only are they more susceptible to attacks like this, but there are so many things that can go wrong if a SOC doesn't have someone who they can say, hey, we've noticed this trend. Can you do something about it with your users? Because, so for example, with PhishMe, we have specific SIMs, and we say, the intelligence team says, we've seen this, and the SIMs are built based on that, and people can select their SIMs. So if there's communications between the SOC and in other departments, the SOC can say, hey, we're seeing this, and other departments who are responsible for training can say, okay, we're going to use SIMs along with that, those themes that you've identified for us.
Our thanks to Max Gannon from Cofense Intelligence for joining us. The research is titled The Rise of Precision-Validated Credential Theft, a New Challenge for Defenders. We'll have a link in the show notes. And that's Research Saturday, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to cyberwire@n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time.